Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground, a CheckProof podcast. I'm Joe Cage, Head of Customer Success at CheckProof and your host for today. I'm excited to welcome Tim Copping, Head of Operational Technology at Breedon Group. Tim has a unique insight into how technology is transforming operations in construction materials and how technology can drive real change on the ground. Tim, it's great to have you with me today. Welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Really excited to be here today.
So, Tim, what would you say was the first thing that sparked your interest in technologies and operation and that kind of combination together?
So I did a degree in cybernetics and virtual systems, which I graduated from in 2002, and it was about the time that the dot-coms crashed, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do in terms of my career. And I fell into construction materials partly by accident. I applied for graduate training schemes and ended up working for one of our competitors, who I worked for 19 years. And over the course of my career, I started to identify opportunities for the use of technology, partly because I had an interest in it, and partly because I just thought there were better ways of doing things than the paper and mandrolic processes that we had. And over the course of my career, I fell in more by accident than design into technology biased roles and program delivery biased roles. And then, again, more by luck than judgment, I find myself here today as head of operations for Breedon Group, looking at how we can use technology and solutions to help transform kind of our business operations. When I joined the industry, I started working for Tarmac's highway surfacing business, and I had a very clear plan of where I was going to be. I was going to start off as a construction site supervisor and work my way up to a senior supervisor and a contracts manager and a general manager, and keep going kind of up that career stream. And I suppose I got halfway through that, and an opportunity came up to go and do a 6 months secondment in business improvement, which I'm not sure whether I particularly look forward to it or not, but it was sold to me as something that would be good for my career, and I went and did it, and that turned into a 3-year change of direction in my career.
Oh wow!
And as that came to an end, we were just starting to move away from BlackBerries into iPhones and Androids, and I saw an opportunity as to how we could start to digitize some of the paper-based processes on site. So I took over a role as national technology manager for the previous business, and that role just progressed more by, as I said, more by luck than judgment, and more by opportunities that came up and demand from the business for more technological solutions.
I believe you had a stint. You were at Finning as well.
Yes, I worked. I worked for Cat Finning for 2 years in between Tarmac and Breedon. I headed up their performance solutions business, and that role was, I suppose, all about making dumb machines smart by putting technology on them. So we were using advanced telematics to harvest information off the machines so that customers got real-time insights in how their machines were operating and performing, for a number of different things. So we could optimize things like payload on dump trucks. So we could optimize fuel burn, machine idle time, cycle time on dumpers moving between earth moving equipment and primary crushers or stockpiles, and also to look at machine health. So how's the machine performing? Are there any parts of the machine that are about to break? Can we fix and remediate before we have a catastrophic failure? So lots of clever things.
So there was a lot of transferable skills.
Absolutely,
that you kind of took with you into that, and then to go into your sort of current role now, is there anything that you do now that might came a bit of a surprise? You maybe didn't expect to be getting involved with that sort of thing, or something that might be surprising to us outsiders looking at you and your role that we wouldn't expect you to kind of be involved with?
I think for myself, and probably for people externally as well, I think I'd be surprised at the breadth of the role that I've got now. So operational technology within Breedon Group goes across 5 operating companies across England, Ireland, or Great Britain, Ireland, and US territories. So the geography is quite large. The breadth of the role goes from material extraction through the manufacturing process to the point at which our material is dispatched out to customers, and everything in between. And when I say everything in between, we've got telematic systems on mobile plant and equipment that I've just referred to. We've got maintenance and inspection tools like CheckProof.
Yeah.
We've got health and safety platforms that we're putting in place. We've got deployment of mobile devices to frontline workers, mechanics, fitters, electricians. We've got drone operations in quarries for looking at quarry stockpiles and quarry faces. We've got monitoring of electrical systems, fuel systems.
The amount that kind of comes under that umbrella, and that is that aggregates, concrete, asphalt, cement, or is there any limitations?
So there's no limitations. So I was just going to mention that actually. So we're a vertically integrated company. So we've got aggregates, so quarrying side of the business. We've got the cement side of the business, which is obviously taking raw materials from quarries and turning it into cement. We've got ready mix business, which takes raw materials from the quarry and the cement business to make ready mix concrete. We've got the asphalt business, which takes raw materials from the quarries and mixes it with bitumen to create asphalt. We've then got the surfacing business, which takes the asphalt and puts it on the roads and the runways. It's a very vertically integrated business at every point in the process. I think a lot of people would think this is a very simple industry, but when you actually lift the hood and start looking underneath, the mechanics and the vertical integration is quite complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts.
I think it's one of those things that whenever I speak to people, they see the products that come out the industry all the time, but they don't necessarily think about where it's come from or how it's got there and everything behind it. So how do you see the role of operational technology evolving with the rise of things like AI in our sector?
Well, I think firstly, there's two questions there. I think operational technology in many industries isn't something that is particularly considered. So I think a lot of people, or a lot of businesses and organisations look at IT as an entity, and IT would cover all the things that we would come to expect, laptops, desktops, mobile phones, networks, IT security, software platforms, that kind of stuff. To look at OT, operational technology, as a completely separate entity, I think is a new thing to the construction materials industry and indeed a new thing to many other industries. So that's quite exciting in its own right. In terms of the use of AI and automation within operational technology, I think we're probably only just at the point where we're starting to consider it, and we're not yet at the point where we're fully maximising the opportunity or maybe even deploying it. We could be using AI to make more informed decisions quicker if we have the data there in the beginning. We could be using AI to simulate manufacturing operations or quarrying operations before we actually do them. We could be using AI to simulate blast plans and do analysis before we do a blast in a quarry. We could be using AI for hundreds of things. And I'll probably mention it later on, but there is some use of AI that are already in use in the industry that we are considering and looking at the moment. For example, AI human form recognition cameras. So there is technology out there that we can bolt on to our yellow metal fleet that will alert an operator when a human walks around or in the path of travel of a piece of mobile plant and equipment. And it's more of an alerting aid to the operator to cover blind spots where we wouldn't usually be able to see. So there is technology out there. I just don't think at the moment anybody is making the best use of it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. I think a lot of people get quite scared of it. Who's it going to replace? How is it going to replace us, etc. Whereas I prefer to look at it as a kind of there's a toolbox of AI kind of things that you can pick from to make your everyday easier, safer, more
Yeah,
efficient, whatever it is. But then I think you kind of answered my next question there, which was, do you think we're behind in the industry or ahead when it comes to adopting AI?
I think we're behind. I think the entire industry's behind other industries.
Mm,
I think partly from our own experience, but I think we are, as an industry, we're lagging behind in the adoption of technology and the adoption of AI and automation. Um, but just going back to a point you made there, I don't think AI is going to replace any jobs. I actually think it'll create jobs because we need
mm,
people that are going to need to know how to look at the data, how to program AI, how to use AI, and how to then make informed decisions off the back of the intelligence that we gain. So whether
mm.
that's new jobs or whether that's retraining existing people we've got in the business to use the AI and the technology we've got available, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen, but I don't think it's going to replace any jobs.
No, no, and I think, like you said, the opportunities are endless with what's going to come. And if you had to say one specific thing or area that you think AI automation could help you, let's say cost efficiency, safety, sustainability, environmental, whatever, is there any one of those that you would say it's going to help more than others?
I think generative AI is probably going to be the most useful element of AI in the short term. So I think to have generative AI built onto or built into your business reporting and business intelligence suite is going to be massive for the ability for a manager, director, whoever, to be able to interrogate data verbally and get the information out without having to go and trawl through spreadsheets. I think it's going to be huge for us.
Kind of moves quite nicely onto my kind of next point was, there's so much data out there now, almost too much, and we you quite easily miss out on some key bits of information if you're not careful. Is there anything that you do to analyze data to help you improve your operations?
So we at Breedon we have a Power BI and reporting team whose I was going to say sole focus. It's not quite the sole focus, but their focus is on building dashboards or suites of dashboards that give our operations managers, general managers, area managers visibility of the data that they need at the right time. So if we can see that generally a plant has got X amount of availability, but we've only got, I don't know, X amount of use, Y amount of usage on it, we can start to identify where the trends are in the availability of that plant, and maybe we can start pushing more material towards that plant, or we can
Yeah.
start to look, for additional material outputs in the local market or whatever. I don't yet think we've quite figured out the knock-on impact and effect that all that data and intelligence can have for us.
Mm.
But I also think there's an evolution on this. We've got to understand what data we need in the beginning, because I think there's a lot of data out there that we just collect and probably don't do a lot with. So if we learn what we do and don't need, if we learn what's valuable and invaluable, we can then look at how we automate that data, the valuable data, whether that be from sensors on the plant that are feeding back in real time, or whether it be from, I don't know, electrical metering or sub-metering or fuel flow meters or telematics capability on mobile plant and equipment. Once we know what we want, once we automate it, we then start that journey, don't we? And we start to evolve, and as we start to evolve, people will have conversations. And, I hear it all the time when people go, wouldn't it be great if, and that's when the great ideas come, because people are starting to think outside the box and think about, well, we've got this information, if we can merge it with, I don't know, geospatial information or commercial information, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? It would be so much
Mm.
more powerful.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's where you get user stories, and that's where you evolve.
Are there any kind of, you mentioned it earlier, with the human detection, but are there any AI tools or anything like that that you're looking at giving to frontline staff
So
when it
we are,
comes to health and safety and stuff like that?
yeah, so we will, well, we are looking, I've got a project on my radar to look at AI human form recognition cameras on mobile plant and equipment. It's been instigated by our surfacing business, our highway surfacing business. So they have a rule about, I say pedestrians, but pedestrians and members of the workforce in the path of travel and the immediate vicinity of the equipment. And sometimes it can't be helped because we are working right alongside a machine which needs human beings to control it. But what we want to do is, where possible, we want to restrict any people being between a machine and the path of travel and either the delivery vehicle in front of it or the rollers that are following it behind it. They're the the most dangerous areas. So anything we can do to alert an operator to make sure that we don't have an incident or an accident on site, or anything we can do to alert somebody who's forgotten, because familiarity does breed contempt. You're on site every day in, day out with these bits of kit. You do get used to being around them.
Yeah.
Or anything that we can do to learn after an event by rewatching footage that then makes our business safer and protects our people can only be a positive step.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those changes are going to be incremental changes. But, even if we save one incident or one accident, or we save one life, that technology paid for itself 100 times over.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any sort of steps you take in that process to kind of help people adopt it and maybe kind of reduce pushback? Is there anything you can do to kind of make that process more
Yeah.
run more smooth, I guess?
I think there's a few things we can do. So we wouldn't just go out to market wholesale, I don't think, and just buy a product and just push it on the business. In the majority of cases, we would do a discovery. So we would look at, what is the real world problem? What is the compelling need behind needing to do this? Why are we doing it? Part of that would be engaging with key stakeholders, and those wouldn't just be senior management. For something like this, it might be, we engage with the machine operators. What are your problems? What are the problems you experience on site? What have your real world examples of, near misses or even, hits been, God forbid. And we would take all that feedback on board before we went out to market and explored an option. And in the majority of cases, I would suggest that we would probably do a proof of concept where we would trial the technology, working with the supplier, but we'd trial that technology on a piece of kit or a number of pieces of kit in a either one specific quarry or with a surfacing gang or a number of gangs or whatever, so that we can control exactly what we're doing. And part of that proof of concept would be, we would do it for a period of time. We would have regular feedback and communications with the team that are running it. We'd find out what they like about it, what they don't like about it. The stuff they don't like about it, we would look, to see if we can improve it, or we could work with the supplier to, I don't know, configure it or change it or make it better or whatever. Before we then went away and made a recommendation to the businesses how we move forward. And the recommendation might be, actually, this isn't the right thing for our business.
Yeah.
And what we've done by doing that proof of concept is we've limited the risk to the business financially, and from a change management perspective, because we haven't pushed something on people that they don't want. But on the flip side, if the business goes ahead with it, we've got good real world feedback from people in the business, and we would probably use those people in the business to help us then roll it out, to take the learns from them, to make sure that when we deliver it, we get it right for everybody else.
Is there any kind of new upcoming piece of technology or tool or something that you feel is going to be kind of the next big thing, or something that is a bigger impact than the others to the industry?
Bigger impact. I don't think there's one thing that I can think of that is going to make a huge monumental impact.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of things that will be the sum of greater changes.
Yeah.
AI, we've already talked about,
Yeah.
will absolutely be in there, and that's evolving. I don't yet think we're maximising the opportunity for human wearable technology, which could and probably should become more prevalent in the industry. So, for example, hand-arm vibration for people using small tools, power tools, still saws, jackhammers, that kind of stuff. We can get half meters, which relies on a process to be followed, which is quite a clunky process. We could be using wearable technology that a user just wears, just like they wear the wristwatch that does all the monitoring for them. We could do the same for noise and dust monitoring. We could, and this isn't about Big Brother's watching you, we could do personnel tracking so we know exactly where every person is on site. So that if somebody does walk into a vehicle area, they get alerted then and there because they've, broken a geospatial boundary. There's loads of things we could be doing. I think telematics across the industry could be more widely and better used to optimize load and haul processes. I think the use of mobile apps on tablets is sporadic in use. So obviously you're from CheckProof and we're using CheckProof quite heavily, and we're about to deploy CheckProof to do further inspections just outside of maintenance. So that will definitely become more prevalent. We should be capturing as much data as we can and doing as much as we can digitally to remove all that paper and mandrolic processes that we've got. So to go back to your question, I don't think there's one thing. I think there's lots of small things that we could do that over time will make incremental changes which become the sum of something greater.
If you could fast forward, let's say 5 years or so, what would you say a fully optimized site or plant would look like in your head? Where would you want to be in 5 years' time?
So if we're talking about a quarry of the future, I would like to see a quarry that is fully kitted out with telematics, that has got smart manufacturing processes in place, where we are monitoring all of our plant and equipment so we know exactly how much material we're hauling from the quarry face down to the primary crusher, that we're optimizing every run of every truck movement on site, and that it's coordinated in such a way that we have minimal idle time on your plant and equipment, minimum downtime, but at the same time that we are optimizing the amount of material going through the manufacturing plant. And if there are any delays or any breakdowns, that we can shut down the entire process in a sequential manner and bring it back online in a sequential manner to make sure that we keep that throughput of material. What we don't want is conveyors running empty. We don't want crushers running empty. We don't want bunching of vehicles on site. We want to optimize as much of that process as possible, and be monitoring the plant and equipment so that we have preventive maintenance regimes in place. So, for example, I keep referring to telematics, but if we're using smart telematics, we're harnessing all this data off equipment, we should know when brakes are starting to wear or when there is likely to be a transmission failure. And we should be able to take that piece of equipment out of circulation and maintain it in a timely and controlled manner to then put it back into circulation before there's a catastrophic failure and it has a wider impact to the operations of the plant and equipment, quarry and everything else around it.
Yeah, catching it before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah.
But then, okay, then so in this kind of 5 years scenario, do automated vehicles, does that come into the question, or is that something you don't really think you'll dive into?
I don't think that we've got the size and scale of the quarries in this country at the moment in time to warrant having autonomous vehicles. Okay, because we operate smaller quarries than they do on the continent or in South America or in Australia, our haul roads change over time. So that would require a constant reprogramming of those autonomous vehicles. I do think that there could be options within the next 5 to 10 years of having remote operated non-line of sight equipment whereby an operator isn't in the machine, they are in an office on a console with their machine controller, and they can see everything that is going on in and around that machine. They're completely immersed in the environment, either through screens or headsets. And we know the technology exists today, and we know that the technology exists for one operator to be able to operate up to 3 pieces of equipment at the same time. So, for example, in a typical load and haul sequence, you would have a dumper truck driver would come under an excavator. The excavator would load from the quarry face into the dumper, and the dumper would drive off. Well, while the dumper is being loaded, the dumper driver is sat there doing nothing. It's only the excavator driver that's working. And obviously, when the dumper driver is driving off, if there's no subsequent vehicles following up, the excavator driver is sat there doing nothing unless they're cleaning the stockpile. So there are opportunities in some scenarios that one operator could operate a dumper and an excavator.
Yeah, yeah.
So that technology is already out there. It is something that we have considered looking at, for sure. We will probably explore it later on this year, early next year. I think what we've got to remember, and we've got to be very clear about, is that it's the right technology for the right application, and not just technology for technology's sake.
Yeah, you're not just doing it for the sake of it. You're doing
Absolutely.
it for a reason, or
Yeah.
And then, have you really played around much with electric equipment or hydrogen equipment, or anything like that?
I'm not aware of any electric equipment that is out there for the quarrying side of things. That doesn't need to be recharged regularly. And one of the restrictions we have in this country is the infrastructure into site for charging. I don't believe the yellow metal industry is going that way anyway. I believe as we start to see hydrogen-ready vehicles come through, that they are looking to go hydrogen. Although the big manufacturers like CAT are very close-lipped about what they're going to do going forward. We have considered it. We've considered alternative fuels in the existing fleet of equipment. But there's been no consideration yet around electric or hydrogen, although we would like to know which way the industry is going so that we can make an informed decision as to what equipment we might want to purchase going forward.
Exactly. It's one of those things. It kind of feels like there's these two contenders at the minute, and it's okay, which one's going to come out on top? And like you said, when it comes to electricity, some of these sites are very large. You can't get charging capabilities everywhere, and that runtime just seems to be just that little bit too short. You might get away with a I don't know, a ready mix plant or an asphalt plant that doesn't need to run for extended periods. But when it comes to quarries, I think it would be quite hard to find an application that works. So yeah, I think watch that space. It'll be interesting to see how it kind of continues to develop. But then, what would you say is one piece of advice you would give to someone that's early in their career when it comes to tech in the heavy industry? Is there anything that you feel like they should experience before they really dive into that career? Is it something you feel like you can just hop into and you'll learn whatever you need to learn on the way?
I think that's a really good question, that is, Joe. I think my one piece of advice to anybody new coming into this industry and looking at tech is to make sure that you take the time to learn and understand the business processes. Because I've been in the industry 23 years, and I'm very aware that I don't know half of what goes on. And every time I go out to site, I learn something new or I become aware of something. It would be very easy, I think, to come in with really great ideas, try to enforce them, and not realise how it impacts the people on the ground, the people that are doing the job, the manufacturing processes. So there's got to be a very happy balance of understanding how the industry works, but also understanding how we apply those new technological solutions to the industry to make sure that, going back to the early point, that we get people on board with that change process. But I think my other piece of advice, if I can give one, is be tenacious.
Yeah, push
You
the
know,
boundaries,
push the boundaries and ask
the
questions.
questions.
I think the other thing, Joe, is I think once we introduce technology, whatever solution it may be, whether it's hardware, software, a combination of the two, I think all businesses need to make sure that they then sustain that change. So this isn't now as simple as just going into businesses and just delivering a project and then walking away. Those projects have to be sustained, and they have to evolve, and they have to change with the business, and we have to listen to users' feedback, and we need to make sure that change requests get processed, and we need to make sure that, security around products is, IT security, cybersecurity is in place. We need to make sure that, as new and emerging technologies come in, that they are, considered and bought into the other technologies we put in place. This isn't, as I said, this isn't a case anymore of just coming into a business, dropping in tech, doing a project and walking away and leaving it. We've just got to make sure we sustain that change and look after it.
Yeah, kind of review it.
Yeah,
Say, okay,
totally.
is this still something that we need? Is there still a place for this? Yes, there is.
I think sometimes businesses, not just in this industry, but across the piece, they've invested very heavily in the technology, and therefore they've got to keep it in place.
Yeah.
And it might be that 5 years down the line, that is no longer the right technology or the right solution for your business. It might be that your business has evolved, past the realistic life of that solution that you put in, and you need to then evolve to look at the next, what's the next technology, or how do we evolve further? How do we grow, and keep continuing to grow our business? I don't think there should ever be shame in looking at a project and going, actually, that doesn't work for us anymore. We need to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and it goes back to that point we were talking about earlier of, stopping doing something isn't a failure. It shouldn't be looked at as a
Not at all.
failure necessarily. It's a kind of lesson or something that points you into the direction of where to go
Yeah.
next. But yeah, one last kind of question that we ask everyone on here is, if you could automate one part of your role or one part of a task on a production site, let's say, at the push of a button, what would you say that would be, and why?
Take my emails away from me.
Yeah.
Just take my emails away. Everything is done by emails, and meetings are followed up by emails, and people send emails to follow up on emails, and people reply to all when they don't need to. And if we could take the emails away, life would be so much easier.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how much lost time there is in that whole process. And I don't know, I think there is definitely, of course, there's a place for it, but it almost feels like a archaic kind of way of working almost now. Now, and I know some people, starting to utilize systems like Teams and Slack and stuff like that for internal communication. But I totally get what you mean. It can quite quickly snowball, and you come back from a holiday and you're got that wodge of emails.
But
and
you
you're
dread going, don't you? Because you clear your emails down before you go, and you know what you're going to come back to. Just get rid of them.
Yeah. But thank you so much for joining me today, Tim. It's been really great talking with you, and I think there's been some really interesting points that we've gone through. So thank you for coming and spending the time with me today.
Welcome.
And for the listeners, thank you for tuning into this episode of Breaking Ground. Don't forget to subscribe, hit follow, so you never miss the next episode, and we will see you next time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe.